6 Canadian pasta brands you should never be eating are sitting in kitchens right now, trusted without question. These are not harmless staples. They are mass-produced foods built on shortcuts, chemical exposure, and weak oversight. What looks like simple pasta is often the result of cost-cutting that turns everyday meals into quiet, repeated risk people never see until damage is already done. 1. Catelli, Canada's most trusted legacy pasta brand. Catelli is one of the most dangerous kinds of brands because people stopped questioning it decades ago. It sits in Canadian kitchens like a permanent fixture, treated as harmless by default. Parents feed it to children without thinking. Families serve it weekly without hesitation. The name feels safe, not because it has earned that trust, but because it has been allowed to exist unquestioned for so long. That familiarity lowers defenses. It convinces people they are eating something simple and benign when they are not. That trust is not just misplaced, it is actively risky. The Catelli people picture no longer exists. This is not a small Canadian legacy brand focused on food quality or tradition. It is a multinational industrial operation built around volume and efficiency. The pasta sold under this name is made with industrial North American wheat grown on large-scale farms where chemical treatment is routine and aggressive. The Italian story on the box is branding, not reality. What looks like tradition is mass production designed to keep costs down while consumers keep believing nothing has changed. The way this pasta is processed matters more than most people realize. The wheat is milled aggressively, stripping away most of its natural nutrients. What you see on the nutrition label afterward is not what naturally survived the process. Those vitamins are added back synthetically. They are sprayed on after the fact to meet minimum requirements, not because the pasta itself is nourishing. It looks complete on paper, but the food itself has already been hollowed out. Then there is the farming side, which most consumers never think about. Canadian wheat is among the most heavily treated with glyphosate in the world. This chemical is commonly sprayed not just to control weeds, but right before harvest to dry the crop faster. That practice increases residue on the grain. Canada allows far higher glyphosate residue limits than many other countries. Pasta that would raise red flags elsewhere can be legally sold here without warning. Independent testing across North American pasta products has repeatedly found glyphosate traces. These are not rare accidents. They are a predictable outcome of how modern wheat is grown and processed. On top of that, wheat grown in certain Canadian soils absorbs more cadmium, a toxic heavy metal that does not leave the body easily. Cadmium builds up slowly in the kidneys and bones. You do not feel it right away. That is what makes it dangerous. Eating Catelli once is not the issue. Eating it regularly is. Pasta is a repeat food. Families serve it weekly, sometimes multiple times a week. Low-dose pesticide exposure does not cause an immediate reaction. It accumulates quietly. Heavy metals do the same. Years go by before the damage becomes visible, and by then the connection is hard to trace back to something as ordinary as a box of pasta. That is how risk hides in plain sight. Not through dramatic poisoning, but through routine exposure people stop questioning because the brand feels safe. The next brand looks cheaper and more basic, but its risks run deeper and affect far more people at once. 2. Italpasta. The brand that feels ordinary enough to never question Italpasta is dangerous because it hides behind being ordinary. It is the kind of product people stop thinking about entirely. It shows up in kitchens without discussion, without hesitation, without scrutiny. Families buy it because it is cheap, plain, and familiar, and that familiarity convinces people it cannot possibly be harmful. When a food feels boring, people assume it is safe. That assumption is exactly how risk slips in unnoticed. That normalcy should alarm you. Italpasta is not a small, careful producer making simple food. It is one of the largest pasta manufacturers in Canada by sheer volume. At that scale, safety and nutrition are not the priority. Speed and output are. The wheat used is commodity-grade wheat sourced from massive suppliers that farm for yield, not cleanliness. These farms rely heavily on chemical treatments because efficiency matters more than purity. What ends up in the pasta is not carefully selected grain. It is whatever meets the minimum standard to keep production moving. This brand has already crossed a line serious enough to trigger official CFIA recalls, including recalls for insect contamination. That is not a minor defect. Insects in finished pasta point to breakdowns in storage, transport, or milling. It means something failed long before the product reached the shelf. When contamination reaches the recall stage, it is only the worst cases that get caught. Anything just below that threshold still gets sold and eaten. Canadian regulations allow a certain level of contamination in processed foods. Insect fragments and foreign material are permitted up to defined limits. Large producers like Italpasta operate right up against those limits because rejecting product costs money. Approved does not mean clean. It means barely acceptable. It means the product passed because the law allows it, not because it is safe or healthy. The real danger is repetition. This pasta is cheap enough to buy constantly and trusted enough to serve without thought. That creates steady exposure to low-quality ingredients and tolerated contamination. Families feed it to children. People eat it weekly. Over time, what felt harmless becomes a quiet, ongoing risk that no one notices until damage has already been done. Processing is another issue people rarely think about. Italpasta uses high-speed drying to move product quickly. This method saves time and energy, but it also increases the formation of processing byproducts that do not exist in traditionally dried pasta. The faster the process, the less time there is for inspection, correction, or rejection. Speed becomes the system. Quality becomes secondary. Nutritionally, this pasta offers very little beyond calories. The wheat is refined heavily. Most natural fiber and minerals are removed early in processing. Synthetic vitamins are added later to make the label look complete. This creates the illusion of nourishment while delivering food that contributes little beyond starch. When families rely on this kind of product repeatedly, diets slowly become more empty without anyone noticing. The real danger with Italpasta is repetition. It is cheap enough to buy often and trusted enough to serve without hesitation. That combination creates long-term exposure to low-grade contamination, poor nutrition, and declining food standards that feel normal because they are common. Nothing feels wrong in the moment. That is how systemic risk works. The next brand hides behind premium labels and upscale placement, making its failures harder to see and easier to excuse. 3. Fior Fiore Pasta. The premium label that quietly failed basic safety. Fior Fiore Pasta does not look like a risky product. It is sold as a premium option, often placed above standard brands on the shelf. The name sounds European. The packaging is clean and understated. Everything about it signals quality. For many shoppers, Fior Fiore feels like a smarter choice. People buy it when they want something better than the usual brands, something that feels closer to authentic Italian food without leaving a Canadian grocery store. That perception is exactly why this brand deserves closer scrutiny. Fior Fiore is a private label brand sold through major Canadian grocery chains. That matters because private labels do not operate like traditional manufacturers. They do not own a single factory or follow one fixed production standard. They source from third-party producers, and those producers can change over time. The brand name stays the same, but the supplier, the wheat source, and the processing conditions can shift quietly in the background. This structure creates a serious trust gap. Fior Fiore Pasta has been subject to an official CFIA recall due to insect contamination. This is not a cosmetic issue. Insects in dry pasta indicate breakdowns somewhere in the supply chain, whether during storage, transport, or milling. For a product marketed as premium, this kind of failure is not minor. It shows that branding and price did not translate into better oversight or stricter controls. What makes this more concerning is how private label production works. Grocery chains push suppliers to meet strict cost targets. If a supplier can meet those targets this year, they get the contract. If not, someone else does. That pressure rewards speed and cost cutting, not careful handling. Quality control becomes a box to check, not a priority. When something goes wrong, the brand can distance itself by switching suppliers rather than fixing systemic issues. Consumers never see these changes. The box looks the same. The price stays high enough to signal quality. Trust remains intact even when the underlying process has already failed. There is also the issue of transparency. Fior Fiore does not clearly disclose where its wheat is sourced or how it is processed. Shoppers assume European standards because of the branding, but assumptions are not guarantees. Without clear sourcing information, consumers cannot evaluate pesticide use, farming practices, or processing methods. They are buying an image, not verified quality. The risk with Fior Fiore is not just contamination, it is false confidence. When people pay more, they tend to consume without hesitation. They serve it to children. They buy it repeatedly. They assume premium means safer. But a recall proves that even basic sanitation can fail under this model. Long-term, this kind of trust is dangerous. It teaches consumers that higher price and better packaging equal protection. It discourages scrutiny. It normalizes the idea that food safety problems are rare exceptions rather than predictable outcomes of cost-driven systems. Fior Fiore shows how easily premium branding can mask ordinary industrial risks. When a product that looks refined cannot meet basic safety expectations, the problem is not bad luck. It is the system behind it. The next brand is even more deceptive because it borrows trust from a major retailer while quietly lowering standards to scale. 4. President's Choice PC Pasta. The private label product quietly lowering food standards at scale. President's Choice pasta is dangerous precisely because of how widely it is consumed. This is not a niche product. It is eaten by millions of Canadians on a routine basis. When a product like this is built around cost control instead of food integrity, the risk does not stay small. It multiplies. Every shortcut taken in sourcing, processing, and inspection is repeated across an enormous number of meals, week after week, year after year. That is how low-grade contamination turns into a population-level problem. PC pasta is not produced by a single dedicated manufacturer. It is contract-made. That means it is produced by outside suppliers chosen primarily on price. These suppliers can change. The wheat source can change. The facility can change. The processing standards can change. The box stays the same, so consumers assume nothing else has changed. In reality, consistency is not guaranteed. Cost is. This model creates a structural problem. When suppliers compete to win or keep a PC contract, the pressure is not to exceed safety standards. The pressure is to meet the lowest acceptable standard at the lowest possible cost. Quality control becomes something to satisfy regulators, not something to protect consumers. As long as a batch passes inspection, it moves forward. Anything that falls just under the legal threshold is still considered acceptable. PC pasta is made using conventional industrial wheat. This wheat is grown with routine chemical treatment, including herbicides applied close to harvest. Canadian regulations allow higher residue levels than many other countries. That means pasta that would raise concerns elsewhere can be sold here without warning. The consumer is never told how close the product comes to those limits. Processing compounds the problem. High-speed milling strips away natural nutrients early. Synthetic vitamins are added later to meet labeling requirements. This creates a product that looks nutritionally complete but is functionally depleted. You are eating refined starch with chemical exposure, not a nourishing staple. When families rely on this pasta as a regular meal base, the diet quietly shifts toward empty calories with hidden contaminants. The scale of PC distribution makes this worse. When a problem occurs, it does not affect a small group. It affects entire regions. Private label recalls across food categories show how quickly contaminated or substandard products can spread before being caught. By the time action is taken, millions of boxes may already be in kitchens. The most dangerous part is trust. PC positions itself as a brand that tests and curates products on behalf of consumers. That reputation discourages scrutiny. People assume someone else has done the checking. They stop reading, they stop questioning. That is exactly when standards slip the farthest. This pasta is not immediately toxic. That is what makes it risky. It is safe enough to sell and risky enough to matter over time. Repeated exposure to pesticide residues, declining nutritional value, and inconsistent quality does not cause a sudden reaction. It causes slow damage that blends into normal life until it is impossible to trace. Before we proceed further, subscribe, like, and comment why you like this video for a chance to win a new Apple MacBook. The next brand removes even the pretense of quality, pushing cost-cutting so far that safety margins nearly disappear. 5. No-name pasta. The cheapest option that pushes food safety to the edge. No-name pasta is dangerous because it represents the absolute bottom of the food system. This is not a product designed around nutrition or safety. It is designed around cost and nothing else. When pasta is sold at a price that barely covers packaging, something has already been sacrificed long before it reaches your plate. What you are eating is the end result of every possible corner being cut, legally, quietly, and repeatedly. This brand is built on one principle: find the cheapest supplier available at any given time. No-name pasta is contract manufactured, which means there is no fixed factory, no permanent sourcing standard, and no long-term accountability. If one supplier raises prices or tightens quality controls, they are replaced. The box stays the same. The contents do not. Consumers never know when the wheat source changes, when the facility changes, or when processing standards drop. That instability is where the danger begins. The wheat used for no-name pasta is commodity-grade wheat, often the lowest tier available. This wheat is grown on large industrial farms that rely heavily on chemical treatment. Herbicides, fungicides, and pesticides are applied aggressively because yield matters more than purity. Glyphosate use is common, including pre-harvest spraying. Canada allows residue levels that would not be accepted in many other countries. No-name pasta operates as close to those limits as possible because cheaper wheat almost always means dirtier wheat. Processing does not improve the situation. High-speed milling removes most of the grain's natural nutrients. What remains is refined starch. Synthetic vitamins are added later to meet labeling rules, but those additions do not restore what was lost. They only hide it. The pasta fills your stomach but contributes almost nothing meaningful to your health. Over time, diets built around this kind of food become nutritionally hollow. There is also the issue of contamination tolerance. Canadian regulations allow measurable amounts of insect fragments and other foreign material in processed foods. No-name pasta regularly tests near those maximum limits. That means what you are eating has passed inspection, not because it is clean, but because it is just barely acceptable. The difference matters. Passing does not mean safe, it means allowed. Because this pasta is so cheap, families buy it often. They use it as a staple. Children eat it regularly. That repetition is where the real risk lies. Low-level pesticide exposure does not cause immediate symptoms. It accumulates. Chemical residues add up over months and years. Nutritional deficiency builds slowly. By the time problems appear, the cause feels distant and unrelated. The most alarming part is how normal this has become. No-name pasta trains consumers to accept the lowest possible standard as normal food. It lowers expectations. It teaches people that eating cheaply means accepting hidden risks. That mindset spreads beyond one product. It reshapes how people think about food safety altogether. This is not about saving money. This is about exchanging health for convenience without realizing it. No-name pasta is not harmless. It is simply quiet. And quiet risks are the ones that do the most damage. The next product looks healthier and fresher, but the consequences of failure are immediate and far more severe. 6. Veggie-based pasta alternatives. The healthy refrigerated option, where failure becomes immediate, veggie-based pasta alternatives sold in Canada are dangerous for a very different reason. These products are marketed as cleaner, lighter, and healthier than dry pasta. They sit in refrigerated sections, wrapped in language about vegetables, freshness, and wellness. Parents buy them believing they are reducing risk. In reality, these products introduce a much more serious one. When something goes wrong here, the consequences are not slow or cumulative. They are immediate. Unlike dry pasta, refrigerated veggie pasta has moisture. Moisture changes everything. It creates an environment where bacteria can grow quickly if temperature control fails even briefly. These products rely on a perfect cold chain from factory to truck, to warehouse, to store, to home refrigerator. That chain breaks more often than people realize. When it does, contamination does not take years to matter. It takes days. Canadian veggie pasta brands in this category have already been subject to Class 1 CFIA recalls for Listeria contamination. This is not a minor food safety issue. Listeria is one of the most dangerous foodborne pathogens because it survives cold temperatures. Refrigeration does not stop it, it only slows it. When people eat contaminated refrigerated pasta, they may not smell anything wrong or see any spoilage. The product can look fresh and still be dangerous. Listeria is especially severe for children, pregnant women, older adults, and anyone with a weakened immune system. It can lead to hospitalization, miscarriage, and death. This is not theoretical. These recalls happen because people get sick. The risk is not hidden in statistics. It shows up in emergency rooms. What makes veggie pasta more deceptive is its health image. People trust it more than dry pasta. They assume vegetables have equal safety. They serve it without hesitation. They may even skip proper cooking because it feels fresh and ready. That false sense of security increases exposure. When contamination occurs, it spreads fast because these products are often eaten multiple times within a short period before symptoms appear. The next category takes everything wrong so far and concentrates it into products people feed to children without a second thought.